It's business as usual here at the Half Point PPR podcast. I am your host, Alex Johnson, and we have Jacob Gibbs joining us today. He's a fantasy writer and DFS guru for Sportsline.com under the CBS Sports umbrella. And last year, he was the seventh most highest accurate ranker on Fantasy Pros. You can find him sharing his fantasy sports wisdom on Twitter at JAGibbs_23. Welcome to the show, Jacob.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's good to be on. I've been looking forward to this for a while. It's a great time in sports right now. We've got basketball starting back up tomorrow. NBA, that's actually my birthday tomorrow too, weirdly enough. So
nice, man.
It's a great day. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Got baseball tonight, got football about a month away. Just got the news today that Damian Williams is not going to play this year. And so as a Clyde Edwards-Helaire truther, I'm fired up, man. It doesn't get much better than this.
That's awesome, man. The burning question on all of our listeners' minds right now is, how do you feel about Lil Dicky's genre-bending show, Dave, not getting one Emmy nomination?
That's really a crime, man. That show is so good. Yeah, I wasn't ready for that question right off the bat. But I am a huge fan. I don't know if you knew that or not. But, yeah, I love Dave. That's a shame because they did such a good job of that. It was so much more than I thought it would be. You know what I mean? The show started as just some cheap laughs at first, but man, they really did a great job of that show. So it sucks to not see it get as much recognition there, but I think he did get a lot of recognition across the industry. So yeah.
Sometimes when I need a little pick-me-up during the workday, I throw on the last scene from the season finale when he does the freestyle, and it gives me a little jolt to energy, man.
Yeah, for sure. No, it really does get you hyped.
Cool. So here on the Half Point PPR podcast today, we're going to share our favorite targets at cost at each position. So let's kick it off with wide receivers. Who do you got for us, Jacob?
There are so many wide receivers to love this year. So much so that I actually feel kind of bad bringing this name up because it's like, oh, Davante Adams. Yeah, thanks for that. Like everyone knows Davante Adams is a stud. And I want to talk about all these other guys, but I do think it's worth pointing out that I think there's a very good chance that Davante Adams finishes as the wide receiver one this year, and he's not being drafted as such. Do you have him as your two, I assume?
Yeah, I have him as two behind Michael Thomas, but not with much conviction. I want to put Tyreek ahead of them if I could guarantee the health and more catches, but it's hard to argue to Adams this year, especially with, I'm sure you're going to talk about Funchess opting out of the season.
Yeah, so Funchess is just another thing to add to the already kind of ridiculous perfect storm we have culminating for Davante Adams here. He just last year, 16 game pace for targets was 169, which would have tied his career high. And I think that you can make a case that he could approach like 180 this year, which is just absurd. Like I really think he's going to be close to Michael Thomas territory when it comes to volume. And if he gets the touchdown regression that everyone is expecting this year, he really could just be a monster, like a true difference maker at the wide receiver position. So this isn't really as much about disparaging Michael Thomas or anything. It's just that I love Davante Adams so much. He's my top 8 players right now. Obviously everybody's going to bust running back at the top, but I think to ignore Adams or let him fall into the second round is negligent. I think there really are a ton of statistical data points that point towards a huge year coming for him. And I don't know if people recognize that or not because the touchdowns weren't there last year, so the fantasy points weren't as high. But
and the turf toe.
Yeah, exactly. And he was playing through injury. Rodgers, again, touchdown regression, his touchdown percentage was low. But, yeah, it was a career-high 2.33 yards per route run for Adams last year, which was the third best among receivers. And nothing really changed in terms of his red zone targets either. He averaged 2.4 red zone targets last year. Or from 2016 to 2018, it was 2.4. Last year, it was 2.5. He just didn't convert on those for some reason. He averaged an identical 0.91 end zone targets per game last year, which is the exact same as 2016 to 18 when he was piling up double-digit touchdowns pretty much every year. And so the big difference is he scored a touchdown on 29% of his red zone targets from 2016 to 18 and 45% of his end zone targets. Last year, he scored on 17% of his red zone targets, down from 29%. And then that 45% on end zone targets dropped all the way down to 18%, which
wow,
that's just insane. Like, and it part of it is probably the injury. And maybe part of it is there's more defensive attention given to Adams as Green Bay's weapons have kind of dropped off over the years. But still, there's no way. 18% was like the lowest of anyone with the amount of end zone targets that he had by a pretty wide margin. So even if you're not sold based off the touchdown regression, there's also the slot opportunities that I think is kind of going overlooked. Who do you expect to be the slot man in Green Bay without Geronimo Allison there?
I mean, Lazard, he plays on the outside. He commanded 27% of the targets last year, but he's like 6'4", like 230. He's not like a slot guy, right? I mean, who's even the fourth receiver? I mean, are we talking about
MVS,
or is Kumaro on the team?
I really think there's a strong possibility that we're going to get a lot more Davante Adams in the slot. I don't think he's going to be a full-time slot specialist or anything. But yeah, I did a research piece on slot targets, and they've been worth roughly 12% more fantasy points than perimeter targets. And Aaron Rodgers loves targeting Davante Adams when he's in the slot. Last year, Davante Adams already had a 29.7% target share. That was up to 35% when he's in the slot. And I think it would make sense, when they create the mismatch there in the slot. Aaron Rodgers is a savvy guy, and he's going to look to target his best weapon when he's in the slot and has a mismatch. So on top of that, he also led all receivers in fantasy points per route run from the slot among receivers who saw at least 40 targets in the slot last year. So I think there's just really so many reasons to love Davante Adams this year. And I don't know, man. I get it with NT. He is safer. I get why people would keep him as their number one. But I think if we're projecting forward and not just kind of leaning on what we saw last year, I think there's a real case to be made for Davante at number one. What do you think? Is that crazy?
No, it's not crazy. And again, if he's inside, it'll be pretty exciting because Jace hasn't done it yet. Lazard's third-year breakout candidate. They're not going to – Aaron Jones isn't going to get 17, 18 touchdowns again. So, yeah, I can't argue with that, man.
I love it. All right.
All right, so I'll take on my receiver next. So it's DJ Moore out of the Panthers. After reaching 9 targets just once as a rookie, I've been a dynasty owner for DJ Moore for a while. And he garnered 10-plus targets in 8 of his 15 games last year in his breakout sophomore year, 87 catches. Again, someone else like Adams, strong positive TD regression candidate after only scoring twice in 2018 and 4 times last year. But getting an upgrade at coach, OC, quarterback. He finished 8th in the league with almost 1,200 yards. He's catching balls from quite possibly the worst starting quarterback in the league last year with Kyle Allen. I mean, and even with Kyle Allen, the Panthers had the second highest offensive pace in the league, and that's not going to slow down with Matt Rule and Joe Brady at the helm now. He finished 8th in the league in YAC, 6th in the league in contested catch rate, so he can beat defenders when they're keying in on him at the catch point, and he can get those yards after the catch with the ball in his hands using his 4.42 speed. And we know, as we saw, that Michael Thomas benefited from. Teddy Bridgewater isn't shy about targeting his wide receiver one. He had 11 targets and 100 yards a game in those 6 games with Teddy. And the Panthers had the second worst defense in the league last year. So they went out and used all 7 draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. And these rookies aren't going to have much time to get in sync headed into their first year in the NFL. Obviously, we're thinking that it's going to lead to a lot of high-flying shootouts in the NFC South. And because of their weakness on D last year, they threw 630 times. And Joe Brady's just known for getting his playmakers in space where DJ Moore can get those yards after the catch. And Matt Harmon's reception perception shared that DJ Moore actually broke at least 1 tackle 50% of the times he caught the ball in space, which was the highest rate among receivers last year. And don't forget about those carries either. He had a little bit over 200 yards on 19 rush attempts the past 2 years. He's going 3rd round, pick 8, 10th receiver off the board, a great wide receiver target for those middle, late round drafters that maybe pass on Adams and MT at the back of the first round and double tap running back there and then come around and try to get a less expensive wide receiver one in DJ Moore. What are your thoughts, Jacob?
Oh, I absolutely love DJ Moore. I mean, the fact that he's being drafted outside the top 10 or right at the top 10 is just it doesn't make any sense. I mean, he was the wide receiver 8 in fantasy before he went down with injury last year, and that was with, like you said, Kyle Allen, just absolutely horrible. Like I don't know. Him and Teddy are a perfect fit, and I'm really excited for the offense under Brady and Rule. I love that pick. Yeah, for sure.
If you had to pick one between Samuel and Robbie, who are you rolling the dice on?
It would be Curtis Samuel. Yeah, I think he was really misused last year, and also he really really suffered from Kyle Allen just overthrowing him on deep balls a lot. And yeah, I'm just kind of a Curtis Samuel guy, more so than Robbie. He's always been a little bit of disappointment. So yeah, that's who it would be.
I don't think there's anybody who gets paid to write for fantasy football that's not a Curtis Samuel guy. So that's what I was expecting here. I think we're just going to see a changing of the guard at the top of the wide receiver rankings after this season, with so many of these second and third year breakout wideouts available in rounds 3 through 8, which really leads us to our next wide receiver target. So talk to me, Jacob.
Yeah, Terry McLaurin, like you alluded to, another one of these breakout guys that is so easy to love. Like DJ Moore, he was insanely good last year in spite of just horrific quarterback play. Do you, off the top of your head, do you know where McLaurin ranked in PFF receiving grade? What would you guess among qualified receivers?
I don't know, maybe top 15?
Yeah, maybe top 15. He was 6th.
Yo.
Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin, Julio Jones, Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins. No one else was better in PFF receiving grade. It's insane.
That's nuts.
It's the second highest of any rookie receiver over the last 10 years. The only one that was higher was Odell Beckham. He led the entire NFL in contested catch rate. The passer rating when targeting him was the 4th best in the NFL among players with 90 or more targets, which is just, I mean, when you consider how atrocious Washington's quarterback play was for it to be 4th best, it's nuts. He was so good last year. And now he is going into year 2 where the volume is going to be up drastically. Like you just talked about Carolina being near the top of the league. They were, I think, 4th in pass to run rate. They were near the top of the league in plays run. And the coaches that engineered that are now in Washington. And for those that don't know, Washington was last in the NFL in plays per game last year. 55.3 plays. I think it was like the second fewest in the last 5 years of any team.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so like over the past 5 years, teams that have run 60 or fewer plays the following year have increased their play total by 6.9% on average. And so like just that, there's natural regression baked in, even if you don't consider the coaching change with Ron Rivera and Scott Turner coming over from Carolina, where they did run the 6th most offensive plays last year. And so, yeah, I think new coaching, already some positive regression coming because it was just way too low. That's not sustainable, what happened last year in Washington. And then the team's going to be behind a lot. I mean, they have, I think, the 2nd lowest implied win total of any team in the NFL. I think this could be a huge change in just total offensive play volume, pass rate. I think it's all going to spike this year for Washington. And if Haskins can be even competent, even average to below average, not horrible, I think with that type of volume, Terry McLaurin is just going to go nuts, man. And I don't know. The ceiling is a little bit capped just because I don't think the offensive environment there is going to be conducive to scoring 6-7 plus touchdowns for any player. But I think just in a PPR league, you're going to have tons of targets, catches, yards for Terry McLaurin. And I think top 15, top 20 is the floor if he stays healthy. What do you think about that? Are you sold on Terry McLaurin?
I mean, he ranks 2nd in market share of air yards, minimal competition for targets. Kelvin Harmon's out for the year, playing with quite possibly the worst defense in the year, in the league. But I didn't think about the overcompensating narrative of we didn't run many plays last year, so now we're really, really going to try to run a faster pace this year. And I like that. I like looking at it from that angle more than just who else does Haskins have to throw to.
Yeah. No, I think looking at offensive play volume is huge. If you ever are working out projections, it can lead you to guys like him that maybe other people, they don't think there's a path to 130, 140 targets for someone like Terry McLaurin because they saw how low the volume was in Washington last year. But I think if you're looking forward, that there really is a pretty high ceiling for him outside of the touchdown numbers.
Yeah, I think he's a steal at the end of the 4th, beginning of the 5th. I mean, he was going middle 5th, end 5th in June. Now he's going 4-12. So I think we're just going to continue to see that kind of tick up. He's tied for my most owned player with this next receiver. DJ Chark. I'm not going to sing the song. It's going to get stuck in my head for the rest of the night. But, we heard how much we love receivers in the slot, and you shared some good stats with us. And Jay Gruden already came out and said he wants to use Chark in the slot more. Slot guys aren't usually yak guys. They're more valuable in full-point PPR leagues. They're normally kind of catch and fall down guys like a Hunter Renfrow, Edelman, Calvin Ridley. But, we saw what those big slots can do with A.J. Brown and Chris Godwin last year, being those yak monsters. And Chark has a similar profile at 6'4", 200. I knew he was fast, but I didn't realize he ran a 4.34. Chark is faster than Deshaun Jackson, OBJ, Amari Cooper. I mean, the question is, what are they going to do with Laviska Shenault? What do you think they're going to do with Shenault, and to a lesser extent, D.D. Westbrook with regards to the slot?
Yeah, Chark was one of the guys I highlighted in my slot article because he averaged his fantasy points per target from the perimeter was 1.8 and went all the way up to 2.9 from the slot. I think he is going to be a monster in the slot next year. I don't know what that means for D.D. Westbrook. D.D. kind of he's had opportunities to break out in the last couple of years, and it just hasn't really happened. And I'm not sure. I don't think Chark is going to see an 80% slot rate, but I think if he does get 30 or 40% of his routes come from the slot, that's definitely going to impact Westbrook negatively. And then Shenault, I'm super excited to see how they use him. I think they can use him all over the field, potentially even as a pass catcher out of the backfield. I think him and Chris Thompson's presence is definitely bad news for Leonard Fournette. But as far as projecting him, it's really, really hard to feel confident what his role is going to be. He's somebody I'm drafting late. I think I got him in the Scott Fish Bowl, but he's not someone I'm looking at in standard leagues, really.
Yeah, he played the Z and the slot in college, but his ADOT numbers were terrible when he was lining up inside. He is a yak guy. I've heard a lot of the guys comp him to A.J. Brown. So if they're asking him to potentially be the passing down back, or it's Chris Thompson, we don't know. The Z and the slot for a rookie might take a while to develop. Chark had over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns last year. He was targeted in the red zone 34 times, which was 7th best in position. He had the 4th lowest drop rate. Obviously, Minshew's favorite target on a team that had the 10th highest offensive pace, with the defense kind of depleted now. He's going a little bit after Terry in the 5th round, wide receiver 21. You think a top 12 finish is easily in the round of outcomes for him this year?
I think it's a possibility. Like McLaurin, I worry about his touchdown upside. I worry about just the overall offensive environment there. I think Mike Tagliere did a really good piece, and he talked about what percentage of top 12 finishes have come from bottom 10 offenses, and I think it was just 10%. And so for him or McLaurin to finish in the top 12, it would have to be an anomaly, which I think they're both talented enough to do just that. But yeah, he's my wide receiver 14 right now, which is way above consensus. But I do think the ceiling is somewhat limited just because I don't know if his path to 7+ touchdowns is really that clear in Jacksonville.
Right. Good point. So who's your first running back target, and why are you taking him over Zeke at the 3rd pick overall this year?
Yeah, Alvin Kamara, which he might have some pressure from Clyde Edwards-Helaire after the news as a top 3 or top 4 guy. That might be too high. I don't know, but he projects really well. As far as Kamara, yeah, it's mostly just he's been above Zeke in PPR formats for the past few years, and then he just had, like Davante Adams, really bad luck on touchdowns last year. And I think part of that, like Davante Adams, might have just been health. So he scored 13 touchdowns as a rookie, then 18 in his second season, and then just 6 last year. Everything else from his fantasy profile was the same. He had exactly 81 catches for the 3rd straight year. He averaged 18 touches per game, which is just down slightly from 18.3 the year before. And he actually had the highest target rate of his career. His red zone role is still intact. He saw 54% of the red zone carries in his first 2 years of New Orleans red zone carries. Last year, he saw 52% of those carries. He saw 75% of the carries from within the 5. There were just fewer red zone carries and opportunities in general in New Orleans, with Drew Brees missing 5 games and then being a little bit more pass heavy than we had seen in the past. And I think with him healthy, coming back off of the injuries that hampered him last year, I think that the case can be made for him to be a top 2 or 3 guy. I think he projects out better than Zeke, who I think Dallas is going to lean a little bit more pass heavy this year. And we've seen with Kellen Moore finally able to do things the way he wants to and not the way Jason Garrett wants to, that does leave Zeke not quite as involved, especially the receiver. So I just think I get it. I get why people like Zeke just because he's dependable and we've seen him do it so many times. But I would definitely be reaching for Kamara just because I think the upside as a receiver is much more prevalent than what Zeke brings.
Yeah, I think that if you think about it, kind of if you think about it from the dumb part of your brain, it's the Cowboys are going to be a better offense. They're going to be in scoring position more. But Mike, I'm going to go into some stats from Mike McCarthy when we get to our quarterback later. But that he just might not be as involved, and it's just funny to hear people say that Alvin Kamara's only, and I use the Lucille Bluth air quotes for the listeners at home, only had 6 touchdowns last year. I mean, I was trying to find some counterpoints for you, and the only thing I can come up with is he's 6 months past the age apex. But he's only 25 years old, so I can't say anything bad about the guy that won me a chip in 2017, grabbing him off the waivers and riding him all year his rookie year. I mean, I love Kamara. My next running back is Kenyon Drake. He's a rare 3-down back in today's NFL on an explosive offense due for positive touchdown regression after the Cardinals kicked more field goals in the red zone than any team last year. It's funny, looking back through the numbers, they started the season in the air raid, going 5 games without a win. Credit to Kingsbury for adjusting. He abandoned his love for 10 and 11 personnel, running more 12 personnel and winning their next 3 contests. And the name of the game is avoiding predictability, and it's really hard to do that running 10 and 11 personnel in the big leagues. 12 personnel leads to more efficiency per play, higher value touches for the running back. I know a lot of people like Chase Edmonds, and I think he's a fine pick in the 10th, 11th round, but he's 5'9", 205. Drake is 6'1", 215. I think Drake's got the red zone on lock. The only thing they invested in the position was rookie Benjamin, who's a scat back out of the 7th round draft capital. So, I mean, if you take Drake, I don't mind taking one of them in the 11th and 19th rounds, thinking that Edmonds kind of cuffs the carries, kind of cuffs the catches. Would you try to back him up at all, or are you drafting Drake, or are you just drafting him naked?
Yeah, I don't handcuff. I love Drake. I will take him back in the first round, but I don't take Edmonds on teams where I already have Drake.
Like it. I mean, he posted 4.8 yards per carry, 5.2 yards per touch in his 8 games with Arizona. Put up 643 yards, 8 touchdowns, 28 catches on 38 targets. So he was the running back 4 during that time behind only CMC, Henry, and Zeke. He hasn't fumbled since joining the Cards, with averaging 2 per season in Miami. I go back and forth on the line. What do you think of the Arizona offensive line?
I think they did overperform a little bit last year, but I think a lot of that was schematic, and I think they should be a league average to a slightly above average line again this year.
Yeah, I mean, they got Humphreys, Pugh, Sweezy back. I like Sean Kugler. He was the O-line coach for Philip Lindsay's breakout rookie year in Denver. Then kind of came in last year to Arizona and brought his football guyness and turned that line around. Drake's playing for a contract too. He's on a 1-year deal. He is also trying to defy the laws of the age apex, coming in at 26 and a half. He's going at the 13th overall at RB9. I haven't taken him in the first round yet, but I've taken him at 13 a couple times. It's really hard in that range. I think we're going to put CEH ahead of these guys with that range where it's, Henry, Mixon, Jacobs, Drake. Those other guys have passing game work concerns, and I don't think Drake does. Now he has a full offseason with the playbook. My biggest fear is he's never been a lead back for a full season in the NFL or at Alabama. What else should we know about Drake this year?
Just one last thing I would throw in there is that Arizona actually ranked 23rd in offensive plays last year, which I think was a lot lower than people anticipated with, air raid, Cliff Kingsbury, all that good stuff. And I think that is going to come up a lot this year. They ran 1,000 plays exactly, and I have them projected for 1,035 this year. And I think actually a lot of other really smart people are more bullish on the amount of offensive plays they'll run this year. So that's just another thing. Good for the offense in general, definitely good for Drake too.
Awesome. Who's your next running back on the list?
Okay, yeah, so we're going with a late round guy here. We've talked about 2 first-round running backs. This is Zach Moss out of Buffalo. And so Moss is going to play the Frank Gore role we've heard, which when you combine that with Josh Allen's red zone rushing role, that definitely puts a cap on Devin Singletary, who I think is one of the most overrated players in fantasy. Splitting goal line carries with Allen isn't enough to make Moss someone you can trust in fantasy, like on its own. and I wouldn't expect him to be super useful early in the season. But I do think there's a real chance that Moss could overtake Singletary as the preferred option on third down as the year goes on. He hasn't really flashed anything spectacular as a pass catcher or a blocker, but just being above average is much more than anyone could say about Singletary. Let me find this tweet. This is from Graham Barfield. So he said, I've charted 57 running backs for yards created over the last 5 college seasons. Zach Moss is third best in yards per route run behind only Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara. Devin Singletary ranked 57th, dead last. And that just kind of backs – I've got stats that are similar. Among 46 qualified backs in 2019, Singletary was 43rd in PFF receiving grade, 44th in yards per route run. Only Todd Gurley dropped passes at a higher rate than Devin Singletary last year. Of his 267 touches in his last year at Florida Atlantic, only 6 were catches. Whereas like Zach Moss had 388 receiving yards in his last year at Utah, which was only 9 yards short of Singletary's career mark in college. So I think it would not be surprising at all to see Singletary lose out on third down reps as the season goes on. And if Moss has third down work and red zone work, that is enough to make him viable in fantasy on its own, even with Singletary healthy. And then what if Singletary goes down? He's a small guy who has had some injury concerns in the past. If he goes down, Zach Moss could be a 3-down back on a team that I think they're projected for 9.5 wins. They're going to be in a lot of positive game scripts. Obviously, the touchdown upside isn't huge because Josh Allen is probably going to rush for 7 or 8 touchdowns this year, but that's a pretty damn good role for a running back that you're getting that late in the draft. There's not very many guys that have true 3-down potential. So, yeah, I'm super into Zach Moss. I really don't understand why the discrepancy is there in ADP between him and someone like Keyshawn Vaughn. That doesn't make any sense to me. They profile pretty similarly. So, yeah, he's definitely my favorite late-round RB target, and I think you're going to hit on my next favorite late-round RB target after we talk about Moss.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's going at the 9-11. I think that's going to rise, though. Do you think everyone, we keep saying he's going to slide into the Frank Gore role. I said it on last week's episode as well. But do we think it's in the cards that he does more than the Frank Gore role and gets more than – and it's not Singletary between the 20s, and then we switch to Zach Moss mode in the red zone or on third down?
I think maybe if Singletary stays healthy, you're saying could Moss just usurp him as the starter? I think maybe as the year goes on, or at least he could take more of the between the 20s work. But I think just given that he hasn't been with the team, I'm sure that's something you've talked about is the effect of COVID on rookies and the shortened off season. So I wouldn't expect it early on. But it wouldn't surprise me if over time they're just like, this guy's better than Devin Singletary. Yeah. No, that wouldn't shock me.
Do we think that maybe they're going to be more pass happy with how much they invested in Diggs?
Yeah, I think they will be a little bit. I think it's, like I said, it's worth noting that they are projected for a fairly high win total. Their schedule's not that hard either. So,
Good point.
I think I'm about similar to last year in terms of passing volume projection.
Awesome. Yeah, I like Zach Moss as well. Next running back's also a late round rookie target, Antonio Gibson. Man, he is a polarizing player. My fear is more around this running scheme that Memphis ran, as they have a really unique approach, a lot of gap-based runs, pulling blockers, which leads to a lot of yards per catch for the ball carriers. We saw Darrell Henderson come out of Memphis, start very slow his rookie year for the Rams. We as an industry kind of fell in love with Tony Pollard and Darrell Henderson heading in 2019. They split carries at Memphis in 2018, remember? And now we love Gibson heading into 2020. So I feel like there is reason to be cautious, but, Pollard ran a 4.52 at 6'2", Henderson's much smaller, much slower, and Gibson has that elite profile at 6 feet, 228, running a 4.39 with 99 percentile speed score on playerprofile.com, where they have him comped to Joe Mixon. He split time between wide receiver and running back due to his dynamic skill set, getting 8 touchdowns as a receiver, 4 rushing. If Washington runs the Air Coryell with Scott Turner, as you mentioned, then we can see Gibson in motion behind the line of scrimmage, kind of creating those mismatches for him to exploit, especially out of the slot, considering, it just takes the guy a couple steps to hit his top speed, and then he can kind of carry that burst through the open field. He runs hard through those like redirects and takes those kind of subtle cuts and angles at a high velocity. It's like watching a high speed kind of cycling race. It should be noted though, he played at junior college for 2 years, then he transferred to Memphis, didn't do anything his junior year. So I feel like maybe I'm just falling in love with the tape and I have rookie fever. I wish we had more data on him, but he's a wide receiver that you can use the running back position going in the middle of the 11th round, high upside, maybe super low floor. I mean, what are you doing with Gibson this year?
I love Gibson, man. I think, like I talked about earlier with McLaurin, Washington, the play volume going up is only good for Gibson. I wish that he would have been able to be with, I wish we would have had a normal offseason this year, because I think that they are going to try to use him in a lot of creative ways. When we saw Scott Turner take over the play calling in Carolina last year, they started to get Curtis Samuel more involved in the backfield in creative ways. And I think that could be Gibson's role. And so that is kind of a bummer that it might take a few weeks to really get him integrated into the role that they want. But I think that there is a clear role that they drafted him for. They spent pretty high draft equity to get him to replace Chris Thompson. And this team is really devoid of weapons. I mean, I like Antonio Gandy-Golden too, but I think Gibson, if I were to choose one of them, is going to be more involved. And I think there's a chance that he emerges as the second or third weapon, which, second or third passing weapon for Washington isn't something that sounds overly appealing. But I think when it's such late draft capital for someone that's as talented as he is, and does have a clear role, sign me up. Yeah, love it.
I think he's not necessarily a zero RB target because of having maybe a minimal floor, but if you got some floor at running back, he is a home run swing in the 11th round that might be able to kind of propel you through the playoffs. Shifting gears, tight end. We're both big fans of Mandrews, but the opportunity cost, taking a top 4 tight end this year is pretty expensive. So who do you like as a more affordable option at tight end, Jacob?
Yeah, it's Hayden Hurst, super obvious one. It seems like he's everybody's kind of favorite mid-round tight end now.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought the opposite. Maybe I don't know. I haven't seen much Hurst love, so I was surprised to hear it.
I might be just thinking about earlier in the offseason, because at one point his ADP was ridiculous. He was like the 25th tight end or something, and all the analysts just kind of hammered it. And again, like my viewpoint on things, my perspective might be a little bit biased because I follow so many analysts. And I think there are a lot of analysts and smart people that are really into Hayden Hurst. So I guess that might be what I'm thinking. I think some people are pushing back against his ADP now because it has risen pretty high, but I'm still super comfortable taking him here. Austin Hooper ran more pass routes than any tight end in the NFL per game. He ran 37 routes per game. And for reference, like Mark Andrews led Baltimore's group with just 19.7 routes run per game. Yeah, like Hayden Hurst ran 12.9 per game. And so obviously they gave up a second round pick to get Hayden Hurst. We've heard Matt Ryan talking him up all offseason. They're really excited for how he can maybe take their offense to the next level. And I think he should benefit from more one-on-one coverage that comes with playing alongside Julio and Calvin Ridley. Should be involved in the red zone just like Hooper was. I'm super excited for Hayden Hurst. I think he's really going to be the guy that is drafted outside the top 5 that ends up in the top 5 this year.
Kind of like the Waller of last year.
Yeah, for sure. I think he has a lot more touchdown upside than Waller does, though.
Yeah, good point. I mean, I guess the only thing that makes me trigger shy is that he was a first round draft. I mean, they took him before Lamar, I think, right? And he got beat out by Andrews, who was a third round pick. But draft capital truther game is a dangerous game to play.
I mean, to be fair, Mark Andrews has been historically efficient, like one of the best, most efficient tight ends in NFL history. Like his yards per route run last year was the second best of any tight end in NFL history, behind only George Kittle. So like holding it against Hayden Hurst that he didn't beat out one of the most efficient tight ends in the history of the game, like don't know if that carries much weight, like Mark Andrews is insanely good. I don't know.
Yeah. That was some fantasy football therapy for me. I think I just love Mark Andrews too much, So in turn, I hated Hurst. But great points, man. I'm a sucker. My tight end is Ian Thomas. I'm a sucker for third-year breakout tight ends. Usually these guys have better draft capital in the 4th round. But the whole industry is frothing at the mouth for this Joe Brady offense, who returned Ben Watson and elevated Jared Cook to relevancy when he was with the Saints. And then, took the passing game coordinator job at LSU, where we saw him move Thaddeus Moss around the formation, lining him up on the outside, in the slot, or kind of in that normal tight end role. So if Brady can get Ian Thomas in the slot, he can use his 84 percentile burst score via playerprofile.com to beat those linebackers. If he gets lined up on the outside, he can use his 6'4", 260-pound frame, huge catch radius to dominate corners. They didn't add any talent in the tight end room. Again, maybe this is the dumb brain thinking, but Greg Olsen left 82 free targets, but I just don't see where else those are going to go. Fast-paced offense, improved QB play. He's going in the kind of the 12th round, tight end 20. But I can't back this up with many stats because he doesn't have great stats, especially in 2019. He actually played better in 2018. So does that galaxy brain of yours tell us anything that we don't know about Ian Thomas here, Jacob, that can sway us one way or the other?
I think one thing you hit on there that is important for Thomas is that there are a lot of slot targets vacated. Greg Olsen was used there some, and then obviously Jarius Wright was used there a lot too. And like you said, we saw Brady use Thaddeus Moss in the slot and even on the perimeter at LSU last year. And Ian Thomas has shown the ability to run routes from the slot. And for what it's worth, Teddy Bridgewater really peppered Jared Cook with targets from the slot when he was starting. Over half of Cook's targets in the time that Bridgewater was starting came from the slot. And only Mark Andrews scored more fantasy points from the slot among tight ends than Jared Cook last year. So I think if there is a path to upside for Ian Thomas, amid all the weapons they have there, I think it will be running more routes from the slot. But that could be Curtis Samuel's job too. It's hard to tell who is going to get used there more, especially with no preseason. But I think it's worth taking a late round flyer on Thomas. I like him in the late rounds for sure. But
you wouldn't feel confident enough to take him as if you say you faded tight end and waited on the position. Would you feel comfortable rolling out Ian Thomas week 1?
I don't know if comfortable is the right word. I think there's a lot of upside. I'm not sure where I have him. Let me find him in my rankings, and you can bring up any other points on him. But I think he's somewhere in the 13 to 18 range, which is just above consensus. But
no, you had him 2 spots above consensus when I checked. Cool. Yeah. Who do you like at quarterback this year?
Oh, it's Matt Stafford, man. I do not understand the ADP on Matt Stafford. In his first season since 2014, without Jim Bob Cooter as the offensive coordinator, Stafford was just throwing it deep like crazy. Like when we saw him come into the league early, just slinging it around, he had a 19.6% deep ball rate, which is the best of his career, and his average depth of target was 11.4 yards, also the best of his career, and was the top mark for any quarterback in the NFL. He was the QB6 in fantasy before he got hurt. And then Heath Cummings, one of my good friends in the industry from CBS, tweeted that over the past 3 seasons in games Galladay and Marvin Jones were both healthy for, Stafford's 16-game pace is 4,454 yards, 38 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Like, the ceiling is there for a huge season from Stafford now that he is being more aggressive and throwing the ball down the field, not running the dink and dunk offense with Jim Bob Cooter. And he's got all the weapons, TJ Hawkinson and Galladay both coming into, another year close to Galladay's prime. I think he's really going to explode this year. I'm all aboard the Stafford train. I think I have him as my QB7 or 8, and he's being drafted as like the 13th or 14th quarterback. It's definitely Stafford for me.
I love the value for Stafford this year. And DeAndre Swift catching balls, Marvin Jones still there. It was announced, I think Hawkinson and Galladay are on the COVID list. But,
saw that,
yeah. But, I mean, are we worried about – I haven't seen anything from Stafford yet, but I know his wife did have a brain tumor last year. We haven't seen anything about him opting out or not, right?
I have not. That would be huge news, obviously. But, given what we know now, I'm totally comfortable taking him where he is.
Definitely. I mean, my ride or die this year is Dak Prescott. Mike McCarthy's offense never finished with higher than the 12th most rushing attempts in the league. That was when he was in the cold weather division playing games outside. But he was top 10 in passing yards 11 of his 12 years. And he was only top 10 in pass attempts 5 times. So he likes to throw, but his teams do it efficiently. Dak's got the most receiving weapons he's ever had. McCarthy likes to use those short dump down passes in lieu of rushing plays, which again is great for Dak and Tony Pollard, maybe Zeke. He's also a Konami code quarterback, able to use his legs. I heard Warren Sharp on Davis Maddox Tapecast say that Dak had a 64% success rate rushing in the red zone over the last 2 years. In comparison, Zeke's success rate rushing the red zone was only 39%. He's now playing for his next contract, more weapons. Last year he finished as the QB2 because Mahomes was banged up. And he did that with run first Jason Garrett in town. He's going in the middle of the sixth round at the 608. Jacob, tell me why I should wait on quarterback and just stop taking Dak in the sixth in every draft.
I mean, you should wait because you can get Matt Stafford in like
the 11th that's round. A good point. Or Matt Ryan in the 12th.
Yeah. No, I love Dak. And I think it does make sense, especially in the red zone. I think that they're going to be a lot more pass heavy this year. In terms of their actual pass rate, though, I think this point is important to at least consider. I want to bring it up and see if it's something you thought about. So they won 8 games last year. They're projected for 9.5 wins this year, and their pace was drastically different when they were leading. They were 21st in pace when they were leading.
Oh no!
But they were second in pace when they were trailing or in a neutral script. So they're one of the quickest offenses and most pass-heavy offenses when they were playing from behind, and they were playing behind a lot last year. They were trailing on 53% of their offensive plays. But that's not right. They were trailing at the 8th highest rate in the NFL last year.
Okay.
Which even like that's surprising for a team that won 8 games, you know? The teams that were trailing at a similar rate won like on average, I think it was 6.2 games. So like for them to be trailing at that high of a rate, I think that's definitely going to correct itself this year if they actually end up winning 9-10 games. And I don't know, it's a lot of Dak's stats came when in garbage time. I want to say that was Pat Fitzmaurice tweeted that out, a really smart guy. And so it's just something to consider. I think everything still points to a huge year for Dak. I think his efficiency is probably going to be the best it's ever been. His weapons are awesome. I'm really excited for the passing game. I do think they will be more pass heavy in the red zone. But I think that we might see them actually be a little bit more run heavy in general, which surprised me because anecdotally, I was totally ready to project them for an increase in passing volume. And then once I kind of dug into the overall volume numbers from last year, I don't know if it is responsible to project their pass rate to increase any more than what we saw last year.
Here's to hoping the defense stinks then, right?
Yeah, I mean, that would
definitely help things. You know, I mean, it felt like rookie fever really struck this industry May, June, while Dynasty Leagues are doing rookie drafts. And, you know, a lot of the drafts that I was in, rookies were going really early. Now the pendulum's swinging the other way with no preseason and shortened camp. So who's your favorite rookie this year?
Well, it feels cheap given the news that came today, but it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
I can vouch by saying you said this a week ago.
Yeah. I've been taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the second round. Their investment in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it's the most Andy Reid's ever invested in the running back position, and it made it clear that they had huge plans for him. Damon Williams was never going to be an issue. I think it was only going to be a matter of weeks, 1 or 2, 3 weeks before this backfield was his. And now that Damon Williams has opted out, it clearly is his. Over the past 10 years, I'm not even taking the Brian Westbrook years into account because it was so long ago. Over the past 10 years, Andy Reid has had a clear plan in place for 3 lead backs. LaShawn McCoy in Philly, Jamal Charles, and Reid's early Kansas City days, and Kareem Hunt before his release. Yeah. Those backs all commanded over 80% of the team's RB touches for at least a 2-year span when they were starting. There were 4 other seasons mixed in there where injury forced Reid to use more of a committee approach. But when he's had his guy that he's planned to use as the lead back, it's been a dominant lead back scenario, like unlike many running backs in the NFL. I think we're only 5 guys that had an 80+% snap rate last year. And I think that we're definitely going to see that from Clyde Edwards-Helaire this year. And when we're talking about an offense that's as high powered as this one is, the sky is the limit. I mean, just looking at those backs that I just mentioned, Shady McCoy ranked as Fantasy's RB2 in both 2010 and 11 before he got hurt in 2012. And then in Reid's first season with the Chiefs in 2013, Jamal Charles was the 7th highest scoring fantasy running back over the past 10 seasons. Kareem Hunt was the RB4, and then he was the RB6 the next year before he got hurt. And from that point on, Damian Williams and Spencer Ware were the RB3. Like, the Kansas City back, Andy Reid back has been a top 5 back, regardless of the offensive situation. And now it's the best offense that he's had during any of that time. And he has the running back that he spent more draft equity than he ever has, and is perfectly fit for the offense. Him and Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, handpicked Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of this loaded running back class and used a first-round pick on him when he's never drafted anyone with any running back with a top 50 pick. I think anywhere past RB8 is really an irresponsible ranking, and I don't think that's just speculation. Like, my projections bear that out too. I ran the projections on Clyde Edwards-Helaire today without Damian Williams, and he actually came out to be the RB3 behind only Saquon and CMC, which that feels aggressive. So I'm going to go back and tinker with that again. But I mean, given the volume that is there, if you really think he's going to play 80% of snaps, which I do, like, it could be just a monster season for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So if I had to pick right now, I would take Alvin Kamara ahead of him, but I would take him over Zeke. He would be my RB4 right now.
I was going to ask, you take him over Dalvin?
Yep. I would.
And what do we think of DeAndre Washington? Could he maybe vulture some goal line work? He's not a bad running back. He didn't play bad. Something in for Jacobs last year.
Yeah, no, Washington was good last year. I think it's important to bring it up. I think he will be ahead of Darwin Thompson if you are choosing to handcuff, or if you're taking a shot on one of these guys in the late rounds. I think it's him over Darwin.
What about Darryl?
I like Darryl Williams, but I wouldn't expect him to be involved. But really, I don't think any of them are going to be anything more than a change of pace back, just given how we've seen Andy Reid use his guy in the past. So, yeah, I like him as late round pick, but no, I don't think he's taken any of Clyde Edwards-Helaire's work.
It's going to be fun to see his ADP just rise and rise and rise. It'll be interesting to see where he settles out. It'll be interesting to see where he settles out.
For sure.
But I can't argue with any of that. I had all these Damian Williams points because he's my guy, but he opted out. So my rookie CeeDee Lamb, he did play primarily on the outside at Oklahoma, but he produced well from the slot. He led the nation in routes yards per route run. He scored 7 of his 14 touchdowns last year, went from the inside per ESPN. There's 180 vacated targets with no Cobb and no Witten in the slot. And Lamb in space is a beautiful thing. I mean, he's probably my favorite wide receiver to watch since that 2016 class of just ballers. But the question is, where is he going to play? Is he going to play in this slot? Some people are fading Amari Cooper due to him matching up with a bunch of number 1 corners this year. But if Amari moves in the slot and stays healthy, watch out. Lamb has better pedigree and measurables than Gallup, but this is Gallup's 3rd year in the offense. So, why should I be worried just flat out assuming Lamb is their slot guy, Jacob?
Yeah, I think the reason that you would be worried is that we aren't going to get a preseason to see who is. That was one of the main storylines I was really looking forward to monitoring during the preseason. But I think that is honestly more worrisome for people who are high on Amari than it is for Lamb, because the difference in draft capital, if you spend a 9th round pick on CeeDee Lamb, it's not as big of a deal if he doesn't get that slot role. And if he does get the slot role, I think he's definitely going to be a value where he's being drafted. I think it's going to be Amari. I think we've seen McCarthy really likes to use a receiver that he trusts in the slot, whether that be Randall Cobb, or even when Cobb went down, it was Devontae Adams or Jordy Nelson. And so I think it's going to be Amari more. I think they'll split the work there. But I totally get your case, and it really, there's no way of knowing at this point. So honestly, it makes sense to take a shot on the cheaper of the two options if we don't know, if it is uncertain. So yeah, that's something I brought up on the FFT podcast the other day. Was I really like Amari, but if it's not Amari in the slot, then Lamb is going to be a great value.
Lamb or Mecole in the 10th?
That's tough. That is really tough. I think Mecole Hardman has more upside, but he's also I think less likely to play a role that makes him useful each week in fantasy. I think it's going to take some sort of injury, or maybe just him straight up beating out Sammy Watkins for playing time, which I don't necessarily expect. But yeah, Mecole, we know he can do it. He was so good last year. And we think Lamb will be able to do it. And he probably will. I think he's a really elite talent. in a great situation. So yeah, I think at that point in the draft, I'm hoping that I already have 2 or 3 receivers, so I probably am reaching on the upside for Mecole over Lamb, but I totally get it if you prefer Lamb there.
That's a good point. Yeah, I like both of them, man. It's hard to pick.
Yeah, for sure.
What rookie are you fading at cost this year?
Yeah, I'm going with Cam Akers, and it's really just about ADP, and I don't feel great about it because I think Cam Akers is tremendously talented, and so if it is just coach speak, what we're hearing from Sean McVay, and Cam Akers comes out and gets 50+% of the snaps, then I'm going to feel pretty stupid. But it's really just about ADP where he's going. I mean, right behind Kareem Hunt, who I have projected much better than Cam Akers, and also I think has a path to top 5 upside if anything were to happen to Chubb, which I think would take a lot more for that to be the case for Cam Akers. Being drafted ahead of Marquise Brown, Will Fuller, AJ Green, Jarvis Landry, Tyler Boyd, Ronald Jones, I can't get down with his ADP where it is. I get that there's a lot of upside, but if he was later in the draft, I would be fine with it, but I can't take him where he's going right now. There's just too many question marks. Especially, I laid this out in regards to Robert Woods on FFT the other day. I think the Rams are going to be a lot more pass heavy with Kevin O'Connell as the offensive coordinator. It's the first time that they've had an offensive coordinator since 2017. And without Gurley around and O'Connell calling the shots, who has a background as a passing specialist, I think they're going to be a lot more pass heavy, particularly in the red zone. And so I don't know. Given that, I'm not projecting that much volume in general for the Rams on the ground. And so if Cam Akers is only getting 40% of that work, that just doesn't project out to a useful fantasy player. But the upside is there for more, of course.
Yeah, 5th round's expensive. 5th round's expensive for a muddled backfield when – I mean, Malcolm Brown could be the goal line back, but I don't know. I mean, the guy, all but 3 of Cam Akers' yards at Florida State came after contact. I mean, that's crazy. And he's only been playing the position for 3 years. But it's more of a fade. From what I'm hearing, maybe it's more of a fade of the Rams running game and a fade of his AVP and not a fade of the player.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I only want to deal with things that are quantifiable, and it's hard for me to back him at his ADP given the way he projects out right now. But I get why people are enamored with his talent. He's a freak. He's super good. I'm really excited to watch him in the NFL. But
I think
that will be on my fantasy teams.
Right. I think he might be in some rookie drafts if you're at the 6 or 7 pick. Good point about Kareem Hunt. I think a lot of people would lean towards Akers over Hunt because they think he's the starter and Hunt's the backup. But I mean, Hunt could be lining up at receiver. And with an improved offensive line in Cleveland, I think he's a good bet there. I'm fading Keyshawn Vaughn. Again, this is kind of a cop-out since he got COVID this week, and Arians is going around saying, well, he's already missed 400 reps, and now he's going to miss even more. But in the real draft, Lynn Bowden went 4 picks after Vaughn at 80th overall, and he's twice as cheap. Vaughn's going at the 802. Bowden's going in the 18th round. I heard Matt Kelly on Roto World Underworld this week was saying historically you want the cheap Tom Brady running back, right? But, his examples were good. Deion Lewis in 2018 was the 2nd highest scoring running back behind Gurley. And when everyone wrote off LeGarrette Blount in 2016, he went on to score 18 touchdowns. So Dario Ogunbowale is going to get the 3rd down work, which is kind of the same way James White started his career with Brady. They both went to Wisconsin, if that matters at all. But, so if you want pieces of this Tampa Bay offense, my feeling is take Gronk in the 8th, who's going 2 picks behind Vaughn, or if a high tide raises all ships, just keep it simple and target Brady at the end of the 10th, or O.J. Howard in the 14th. Dare's going undrafted, but I'm sure that's going to change. And Dare was the only running back that was present in that Brady offseason workout, if that matters to anybody. But I liked Vaughn's tape, especially before he got drafted by the Bucs. He's good between the tackles running. He's a decent pass blocker. He runs hard in the red zone. But, I don't think he's this passing down back that everybody wants him to be. And I know Arian said earlier this summer that, you want a running back that never comes off the field. But I'm not sure if he's the guy. What do you think of this backfield, Jacob?
I totally agree. And the ADP for him doesn't make sense, especially with Dare there. So, yeah, I have 0 Vaughn. I was taking Ronald Jones, if taking one of them because he was cheaper. Obviously, that's not the case anymore. But, yeah, even with his ADP falling, I think it would have to fall another 3 or 4 rounds, honestly, before I would be comfortable taking him. So, yeah.
Yeah, same here. Hey, man, I can't thank you enough for your time. Is there anything you want to share with our listeners before we wrap up, Jacob?
No, man, just tell these guys to keep coming back, man. This was a lot of fun. I really like your podcast. You're doing a great job. Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, man. Have a good one. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you too, man.